Hi there, I'm Des.
And I'm Tim, and together Des and I head up the men's ministry Momentum Australia.
Momentum has multiple functions, but primarily our aim is to help men to succeed in life, to do life better.
We run a weekly radio show that goes all around Australia where we talk about anything and everything that relates to men.
And you know, we encourage men to do life in community, to do life with other men where we can be accountable, we can be welcomed, we can be open and honest about what's happening in our world.
We'd love you to have a look around our website. That's momentumaustralia.org. There you'll find a bunch of resources to help you on your journey and all of our previous episodes and topics.
We thank you for your interest in Momentum Australia, and we hope you enjoyed this video today.
Okay, welcome to this week's Momentum. So good to have you tuning in. Thank you for doing that and spending some time with us here at Momentum. Really appreciate you doing that. Hey, don't forget to check out our website, momentumaustralia.org. There you'll find a bunch of stuff on there about who we are, what we're doing, what we hope to achieve, how we can help you on your journey. And of course, you can reach out to us as well. We'd love to hear from you, whether that's you need some help or some guidance in an area, or you're trying to find a men's group or something locally, reach out to us at momentumaustralia.org. And of course, if you'd like to financially support us as well, just quickly, that would be fantastic. We don't get a lot of support from around the country. So if you've been blessed and benefited from the stuff that we talk about and you'd like to throw some dollars our way just as a way of a thank you and a nod, we would really appreciate that. Thank you very much. momentumaustralia.org. As always, it's Des and Tim. And Des, how are you this week, my friend? Are you well?
Yes, I'm good. Really, really good. Yeah, and it's amazing we get to do this. We've done, I can't remember the number now, but it's like quickly approaching 200 shows.
Wow.
So it's absolutely unbelievable on all sorts of subjects. It's been really crazy. What a great journey to be able to sow into the lives of men. It's just such an honor to be able to do it. But guys, don't do life on your own. You know, one of the things that we say always in Momentum is we're all on a journey, and you know, you may have people around you, but you don't have anybody you can have a safe and confidential conversation with. So can I encourage you to reach out to 1-800-000-MEN? That's 1-800-000-636 with the Momentum Care Line. It's available 7 days a week from 9 a.m. to 11 p.m. 1-800-000-MEN. And also, as you probably all know now, we have our YouTube channel, Momentum for Men, so you can see Tim in all his glory as well as hear him. So it's really good, yeah.
Yeah, we blank out the face of Des. It's just not worth seeing.
That's a wise decision.
Hey, look, in all fairness, Des, what you mentioned there about the care line, really appropriate potentially for this week's topic as well, because this is a massive topic for men. And one that we don't often talk about, particularly in church circles. It's a very personal thing, and one that we may feel very, ashamed of at times, depending on what's happening in our life. It is fun. It makes us feel good. It can be good for the population, but it's also a tricky subject. We're talking about sex on this week's show.
What was its intended purpose, and why is it so powerful, and why are men and women wired so differently in the area of intimacy?
Yeah, we're going to get really, really honest. So heads up before we get into the show. It might get a little squirmy for all of us, actually, but we're going to go there with our guest speaker, author, and just legend, Brian Andrew, once again joins us. Great to be chatting with you again, Brian.
Hey, it's great to be here with you, gentlemen. It's an honor. And the topic as well is just something so relevant to all of us, really. So thanks so much.
You've got a big claim on your website, which incidentally, livehappytogether.com.au is the website with your man book. And I think your man book claims that you can have the best sex of your life. I'm not sure what you've got in that chapter of the book, Brian. We'll need to read it. I've just sparked many men's curiosity. Expect the sales of the man book to go up in the next.
Yeah, that was my son and son-in-law, a couple of the young guys, when I was just putting the final touches to the book. And I had the man book will help you enjoy the best sex you ever had. I had it down a little bit in the list of the guarantee. No, put it at the top. Put it at the top. We're interested. We want to have the best sex we've ever had. Look, I am an expert because I've been married for almost 48 years. I was asked to do a seminar, Moira and I, on sex. They couldn't find anyone else, apparently. I said, why don't you get someone younger? And they said, no, you've got a reputation in this area. Of being able to speak about it without embarrassment.
Oh, I see. Right. Okay.
And and also that what I did was I actually worked out roughly how many times Moira and I had had sex over the 44 years or whatever it was. So I said, well, I was introduced as an expert. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a doctor. But I reckon I've had full-on sex, you know, how many thousand times it was. Well, after they nearly picked themselves up off the floor laughing. I would also add to your comments, Tim, that I've discovered over decades that there's several topics you really must have humor because there's so much pain.
Yeah.
And things like finance, prayer, some of the other ones, sharing your faith, but definitely sex. So I don't know a single joke, unlike probably Irishman Dares. He probably knows hundreds of jokes, but somehow when I speak about this topic, there's a lot of laughter. And that's not an accident on my part. I never, ever cross the line to crude or rude or anything like that, but just reality. And sex, Des, you said before, you know, what is the purpose of sex? You know, I think previous generations, it was a fairly monotone, it's for procreation, you know, for getting pregnant and having a baby. But for Moira and I, that was almost the prevalent mindset. But then there was hardly any books on sex or anything like that around 48 years ago. But then I discovered over time that, hey, it's also for recreation. We were designed, man and woman, designed to enjoy sex, not just endure it. And it shouldn't be a chore. There should be laughter. There should be, you have fun around it. And so I've actually owned hundreds of books on relationships over the years. And even before I was a pastor, Moira and I wanted our marriage to be the best thing we did on the planet. Like, we want to do this well. So we were hungry. We went to seminars. We did everything we could to do marriage well. And certainly more and more books on sex came onto the market. And so we bought some of them as well. And any wisdom we have on this topic doesn't come from the Kama Sutra or some stupid television program or Netflix. Our primary wisdom comes from God's word. And I was shocked to discover, for example, that the book, The Song of Solomon, that people think is some kind of high-level God loves you thing, it's actually very erotic. And it contains a lot of specific instruction on sex and the sexual experience. So Song of Solomon was one of my favorite books for a long time. Oh, that's a good one. And so, yeah, I'm experienced. I think Moira and I have done that well. It doesn't sound very modest, but I think good sex is also a reflection of the quality of a couple's relationship.
Yes.
And if you've got a good relationship, you've got clarity of common purpose, you've got the sense of being part of a team, you've got an emotional connection, you're far likely to have good sex because that experience is just an expression of that healthy relationship.
But men and women are so different, Brad. And so, they have different needs, different mindsets in terms of going into intimacy. And on previous shows that we had you on, you talked about those things. Can you just refresh our minds about those? How women and men are different?
This was an astonishing mystery to me when we got married. Like, I was ready for sex all the time. And when we got married, I thought, wow, sex on tap. This is going to be good. But I realized that wasn't necessarily Moira's mindset. And I found something that I jotted down. I don't know if I put it in that book or not, but when it comes to sex, we tend to be spotlight and the woman candlelight. We tend to be the football paddock and women tend to be symphony. We tend to be microwave and women tend to be oven. We tend to be, just what we're good to go. And I remember as a young married man reading a book that diagrammatically represented a person, a male and female's readiness for sex in terms of arousal. Yeah. And you can imagine in your mind, the male arousal basically is almost a vertical line. we're ready. We're good to go. We don't need anything, much at all. But the woman's is kind of an oscillating up and down, like I mentioned, the symphony.
Yeah.
And I'm being a bit prayerful about that and wondering why. And I felt my understanding was that God created us differently, for men especially, not to approach sex selfishly. If we're good to go and we just want, to have relief or whatever, it's actually very selfish. And if we want, you can't have great sex if it's all about you. You just can't. And I think the whole area of serving one another in a marriage is fantastic and powerful. And I would apply that to the bedroom as well. So that, it's a serving thing. And another thing that mystified me was we might do a particular thing in our lovemaking. So what am I going to do the next day or two later? I'd do the same thing because it worked last time. And it's kind of pushed back. And I'm like, but you liked that the other day. Yeah, well, I don't now. And I'm like, oh, gosh, that was a real mystery as well. But what I learned was humble myself. And just because something worked one week, it might not be what, it depends on a lot of things. So it's complex and simple at the same time. And I think it takes the desire to serve each other. Like, seriously, this might sound almost a bit kinky, or not kinky, but I used to pray at times that I would serve Moira sexually. And so my goal was, if you like, her orgasm or her pleasure. And honestly, when you take the focus off yourself and you seek to give your partner pleasure, you're actually setting yourself up for great sex. Because it's not just you. It's the two of us, and so a woman, it certainly, for a woman, she's got to feel valued. She's got to feel that you value her as a person before she can respond. And of course, if you're at that young season of life where you've got young kids, then the most sexually stimulating or turn-on thing you can do is bath the kids and put their nappies or their PJs on, or vacuum the house. Or I've said to some guys, I learned that a woman's primary sexual organ is not what you think. It's actually between her ears. It's her brain. And she's got to feel valued and that you care about her. Because a woman is actually very powerful potentially sexually. And they're not by nature necessarily passive at all. I think some men think women are passive. Well, what if I hear men say that? I say, well, you haven't unlocked or shown the kindness and the grace and the understanding that she's a powerhouse of sexual energy. But it's not released if you don't serve her and seek her pleasure, if you know what I mean.
Yes. Yes. Actually, one of the things you did say in the previous show was that intimacy doesn't start when you go to the bedroom. No. Intimacy starts at the beginning of the day.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I remember that phrase. Yeah.
Let's talk about communication, because I think we can mistakenly as men just assume, particularly if we've had previous partners, we know how a woman's body works, that sort of thing. Do you think that a lot of challenges for couples is that they don't talk about this stuff openly, or if they're Christians particularly, maybe this is a topic in church that, they've tended to not talk about, so they don't talk about it behind closed doors, and that lack of communication is actually really hurting them?
I agree. Yeah, I agree. I'm staggered. I thought, you might have thought with the quote, sexual revolution, unquote, that kind of pioneering changing of attitudes and the pill and all this sort of thing would have changed things with Christians in the church. And to my astonishment over the decades, I found it hasn't necessarily. That there's still a great reluctance to talk about it. It's almost like a taboo topic, not in all churches, but in I think it's, as you said in your introduction, it's around the fact that people have pain associated with perhaps being abused. I think if you've had sexual partners before you do get married, you might think that you're talking to men, that your new bride, when she comes into the room naked, it's all good to go. But she's got imprinted in her memory experience that she's had in the past. And she might come naked, but she doesn't necessarily come alone. And I think it takes a wise, gentle gentleman, if you like, who becomes aware of that because of the pushback, and that she's still wrestling with certain experience she's had in the past. And that can apply to males as well, of course. And that I think absolutely have a conversation about it, you know, like even I did when I'd say to Moira, hey, you really liked that last week, but you're pushing back now. What's that all about? And sometimes she'll just say, I don't know, but I like that then, I don't now. And maturity means you just go with that. There's no explanation sometimes. But obviously, I think a healthy sexual relationship is one of the greatest gifts that God gives us, and it's very special and it's wonderful.
I think this is an important part of this particular conversation to unpack. Let's talk about pornography, masturbation, guys, desire for sex, which, as you said, for all of us, we can attest to. Like it's a lot stronger than most women, for the most part, not always, but for the most part. And guys can often struggle with that, and that can lead them into pornography, masturbation, that sort of thing. I suppose let's start there. We are wired for release on a regular basis as a man, and you know, when we get married, we think that our wife is going to fulfill all of that, and yet the truth is that's a tricky space to navigate. How do men listening right now who are in a marriage where they're getting sex, but maybe not as often as they like or need? Let's unpack that. What do they do with that? What do they do with the fact that their body is just on this continual cycle of producing and needing relief and release?
Wow, it's a big question, man. Such a big question. And again, without having professional qualifications, but having decades of experience, not only personally, but with hundreds and hundreds of couples, reading voraciously hundreds literally of books that often address this. I think I might have a few thoughts. I would say, first of all, I am not grey about the benefits of pornography. I'm totally opposed to it. I predict that sometime in the future it will become criminalized, because it's not just the people who watch it, it's the backstory of those who produce it, you know, and the staggering amount of pornography online. It's very sad, I think. Look, it's had an incredibly negative effect on, possibly we're now in the second generation, I guess, of men who are affected by, and to a lesser degree, but some degree, women. I think, I'm not sure if I mentioned this to you guys in the past, but I would call it any involvement of pornography swamp sex rather than crystal spring fed water sex. There's a purity. When I was a little guy, I used to go fishing, and I went and put my bike against a tree, had to walk across 2 paddocks, cow paddocks, to get to the river. The second paddock, in a big part of the corner, there was a swamp, and the cows would go into that to drink water, and they would pee and poo in that swamp. And it was toxic. It was filled with bacteria. And I would liken sex that involved pornography to swamp sex. And healthy sex, more like the beautiful river that was 10 minutes away, where my 3 brothers and I learned to swim. And it was a stream that you could see right through to the bottom. You could see little minnows, even little trout. And we swam in that. We never got eye infections or ear infections or diarrhea. And I think ideally, God wants us to have crystal clear spring sex, which is not encumbered with the dynamic of pornography. I've had women say sometimes, like, a man will push his wife to watch pornography when they're going to have sex or have sex. And sometimes a woman has said, you know, I felt like he wasn't really having sex with me. He was masturbating inside of me, which is a pretty shocking thing to say. But what image is he carrying in his mind, having the sex, if they're just And a couple did ask me a little while, not that long ago, that we now watch pornography to spice up our sex life. And I said to them, well, I don't think it's a good thing. Again, I don't want to judge. I don't want to be a legalistic, patronizing person, but I try to paint a picture of what's possible. And what's possible is crystal clear river sex rather than swamp sex. And I think women often will feel like there's an expectation on them if their husband's watching pornography for extreme things that they're not comfortable with.
Yeah.
And ideas that they think, well, where did he come up with that idea? Well, he watched it on pornography. So he wants this or he wants that. And this is demeaning. It's potentially even jeopardizing to my physical well-being. Why should I do that? I find it's another one of those pandemics around the world. And I was staggered to read a University of Queensland survey, perhaps 3 years ago now, and it said that erectile dysfunction is growing the most rapidly with young men in their 30s. And I remember reading that and feeling incredibly sad. And then I read the rest of the article, because this was just a secular university article. And they were saying, look, some of these fellows have been watching pornography and masturbating since they were early teens. And so they get into their 30s, even a bit younger, and they can't perform, partly because of what they've done for so much of their life. And I thought, what a terrible waste. What a waste, something that should be beautiful, enjoyable, mutually satisfying. So I'm very strongly against it. Of course, I'm a male, so I'm aware of the powerful temptation of it. And I think of the addictions, pornography is one of the most difficult to break.
Yes.
If you get started, I'll just have a little look. It's like there's a little toe hold there, and if you watch a bit more, it's a foothold, and if you watch a bit more, it's a stronghold. And once you get to the addiction phase, you need professional help. You just do. And there's people around who specialize in that area. I think it's a pity more churches don't. Do you remember that course called Valiant Man?
Yes. Yes.
Alan Meyer
wrote.
We found in one of the churches I was in that our men found that the most helpful course they'd ever done to overcome pornography. So there are resources out there, but you're probably going to need some help if you're kind of addicted.
One of the things, Brian, is it true, if you're using pornography or you introduce pornography into your marriage as part of your intimacy, you can't go back from that. Once you get to that point, it's in your life. Certainly for men, I would imagine, they won't want to come back from that, right? Which causes the addiction. Do you know what I'm saying?
I don't have enough specific experience but I to think of case studies or whatever, but I agree with you. It's harder the longer it happens. I think it's incredibly insulting and demeaning to a woman for a man to bring that into a marriage or with a partner. Like, what's she thinking? Most women will think, I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough for him. I can't satisfy him. He needs more than I can give him. Well, that's a real game changer for a healthy marriage.
Yes.
I would say to guys, get help. Yeah, especially if you've been watching for a long time, get whatever help you can, because again, there's enough material around that proves it is within, you can expect to break the hold that it has on you. But I don't think it's unlike alcoholism and other addictive behaviors. It's that powerful. It's that strong. It's not something you can just get a slap on the wrist and say, "Oh, right, I won't watch it." Well, it's more powerful than that.
Yeah.
Brian, let's paint another scenario. Let's say that guys are in a marriage. There's not pornography in play, but they're perhaps not getting sex as much as they would like, so they can tend towards masturbation. Or they're in a marriage where the sex is completely dried up and it's just masturbation now to relief. What are your thoughts upon that or around that?
Yeah, again, I'm staggered. We've done marriage seminars for a long time, and sometimes to help with not being embarrassing, we might put a little box off to the side or these days, a more modern way is to have a phone number that they can send a text through. What staggers me is the number of marriages where they don't really have sex at all, and they're both okay with that. And I've talked to couples like that, and I'm like, well, I don't think it's healthy. But then you go back beyond the symptom to the why. And as I said earlier, there are some men who've often seen things on the screen or in a book or whatever, a movie, and they want their wife to do this. And it's not something she wants to do, you know. And I say, look, I think the whole area, for example, of oral sex, the Bible doesn't specifically talk about that. But the issue is, I think, with a couple who are committed in a covenant of marriage, that it should be your sexual experience, it should be something you both agree with, you know. And if you want to try something a bit different, I was doing a camp once and they asked if I would do an extra session on sex just for couples only. I said, sure, Northern New South Wales. So I didn't realize till after this was a setup. But one of the guys, a farmer, puts his hand up. What do you think about oral sex? In front of about 60, 80 people or whatever. And I said, well, I think if you just enjoy talking about it, that's really quite sweet. Half of them laughed like you guys are laughing, and the other half had no clue I was talking about. And I went on to say, it's about mutual agreement.
Yes.
And if there's a mutual agreement for certain sexual expression, well, that's fine. You can't say it's right or wrong if you both have some level of enjoyment. And I think there are seasons in life, like when a man's wife is pregnant, and you know, you need to be, you have to adapt, and then she's breastfeeding, and then other times of enforced separation, like if you're in the military or you fly in, fly out, which is very common, that there's creative ways to keep in touch. For years and years, I had no idea what phone sex was. And I didn't want to Google it in case somebody wanted to track down what I was watching on my computer. But, you know, I couldn't figure out how to have sex on a phone. But I came to understand that, you know, if your spouse is away somewhere, you can have a very creative chat. And you might even have some expression of sexual pleasure. Well, there's nothing wrong with that in my book, as long as you're confident no one's taping your conversation. If it's
yeah, don't do it over Zoom.
That's right.
Some final thoughts, Brian, because we are running out of time. I mean, what seems to be a common thread is that this is something that's not talked about well, maybe at all in church, well in marriages between couples. And there will be people listening, and quite a few, probably on a higher percentage than not, that are not having a good sex life or a fulfilling sex life in their marriage, right? Let's be honest. Let's speak into that space for the last few minutes. Whether it's male, female, there's just tension in the house, whatever, but they're both not. Like, how do we get this thing back on track? How do we even start that conversation and start repairing breaches to then potentially having a great sex life back in our marriage?
It's such
Big
a
question,
tender
I realize.
area. It really is a tender area, isn't it? And I think the one of the biggest things is getting a joint agreement, like, hey, we need to work at this together, preferably if the other person isn't willing. And I mean, there's books around like Laugh Your Way to a Happy Marriage, which is very explicit in places. And he's also, I can't remember that guy's name, but
Mark
he
Gungor,
got
I
a
think his name is.
podcast or a video series that I would suggest finding a guy like that and watching it together in your own home, you know, watching and then talking about it. And I think there would likely be tears, confusion, sometimes from a guy. I had no idea you felt like that. You know, we tend to lack awareness at times. And certainly, you know, there are people around who are professionally trained. They call themselves sexologists. And there's a few Christians around as well, you know, that you might get a session with them and maybe on your own, but then as a couple, at a certain point, it really needs to be the couple to understand each other. And I think one of you touched earlier too on the fact that the sexual desire is not always the same level in a couple. In fact, often it's not the same level at all. And so one of the couple might think, I hardly ever have sex at all. And the other thinks, we're always having sex. It's too much. And this is, sometimes you're listening to this couple and you're thinking, well, they're not on the same page at all, but it's their perception, their experience. And certainly it's an area where there can be a lot of pain that needs healing. Women feeling objectified, men feeling that she's not willing to give herself often enough. And communication is so important. And it is difficult. More generally, to communicate well for a man is more difficult than a woman. And I think the woman needs to be patient. But the interesting thing is that, well, my husband just doesn't want to talk about it. He's really not a good communicator. But if the topic is football or AFL, or he'll talk, fishing, golf, the guy will talk. So you can't just totally blank the guy out and say, well, he's just not a good communicator. It's a matter of, we were in Wanaka just a couple of weeks ago. We met this family and got talking to them. And it was a multi-generation family. We were sitting looking out over Lake Wanaka. And one of the women, the mother, the older one, she said, well, I've been married twice and I got divorced to the first husband because he talked all the time. He drove me nuts. So we got divorced. Now my second husband doesn't talk to me at all. So she went from talking too much to not talking at all. And he drives me nuts as well. And they were heading off on a yacht, on just the two of them, to circumnavigate Australia, I think. And I thought, well, good luck,
Wow.
But that communication thing, we've all just got to keep on growing.
Yeah. Brian, you mentioned in a conversation off air, and maybe we'll finish with this, that everything essential about a person is not visible. And when you mentioned that, I wrote it down because I think that's so huge. And I think that if you can remember that in your marriage, everything essential about a person is not visible. What's happening for this person that you've married? We can get into a conversation and go, what's actually happening for you here? Can we talk about that? Hold space and do that maturely and actually get to the crux of what's happening. It's a good starting point. It's a difficult place, but it's a good starting point. You can find more details and resources at livehappytogether.com.au, livehappytogether.com.au. That's Brian Andrews' website. Lots of stuff on there. And we've got some stuff on momentumaustralia.org as well that you can check out around this topic. The psychology of sex has been our show this week. What a great topic. What a powerful topic. Brian, thank you for speaking to that space so honestly, openly, vulnerably, truthfully, and without making it feel uncomfortable. In fact, it was quite a joy. Lots more in that, and encourage the guys to go back and have a listen. But thanks for your time again on Momentum.
Hey, thanks, Tim and Des, and to all your listeners. It's a pleasure and an honor to be able to share a little bit of our journey and the wisdom we might have picked up along the way.
That's really cool. Thank you, man. Thank you for watching this week's show. And we hope you subscribe to Momentum so you can find out what's happening in the shows in the future.
Absolutely. And keep an eye on our website too. That's momentumaustralia.org. There you'll find all of our shows and a whole heap of resources to help you on your journey. That is momentumaustralia.org.
Until next time, keep moving forward
with Momentum.